3 knocks. Always 3. Quick and light and certain. The knock of someone who knows they are welcome and is not asking permission, only announcing arrival. I know that knock the way I know the sound of rain on this particular roof, the way I know the third stairs creak and the sound the garden gate makes when the wind is from the east. I know it because I have been hearing it for 6 years, and because every time I hear, something in my chest does the same thing. Lifts quietly, the way a curtain lifts when a window is opened. 3 knocks. And then her voice. Anne. It me. As though I could not have known. As though those 3 knocks could belong to anyone else. I want to tell you about Rosie. I want to tell you about what it means to be found. Not dramatically. Not rescued from something terrible. Not pulled from a wreck. But found in the quiet, persistent, Tuesday and Thursday way that a 13-year-old girl has been finding her grandmother for the past 6 years. In the way that has become, without either of us declaring it, the most important appointment in my week. The world. When you are 72 and widowed and living alone in the house where you have lived for 40 years, has a tendency to go quiet. Not all at once. Not unkindly. But quietly. The way light goes in autumn. You look up one day and the afternoons are shorter than you expected, and you are not sure exactly when it happened. The family is there. They love you. They call when they remember to call, and they visit when their schedules allow, and they mean every good intention they have. And stealth. The week can be very long. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3:30, there are 3 knocks on my front door. And then the world is not quiet at all. Let me tell you how it began, and what it has become, and what happened last March that made Martin and Karen understand, finally, what their daughter had been doing in this house twice a week for 6 years while they were busy living their busy lives. My name is Frances. People have called me Fran for so long that Frances has come to feel like a formal occasion rather than a name. But it is the name Bill always used in full. And after he died I found that I missed hearing it. He was the last person who consistently called me Frances. The last one who used the full weight of it. And with him gone, the name has had to be stored. Which is one of the many small losses that accumulate after you lose someone who has been the center of things for 40 years. Bill died 6 years ago. He had been healthy. Or we had believed he was healthy, which is the dangerous kind of healthy, the kind where the body is keeping its own counsel. And then he was not, and within 8 months he was gone. Pancreatic cancer, the kind that does not give much notice. We had been married for 43 years when he died. We had 2 children. Martin, who is 50, and Bet, who is 46 and lives in New Zealand, where she went for a year at 28 and simply stayed because it suited her, which is the most Bet thing she ever did, and which has resulted in her being both very far away and very completely herself, which is the correct trade-off for her, even if it is sometimes a difficult one for me. Martin lives 20 minutes away. He and Karen have a comfortable life. Both working. Both busy. The particular busyness of 2 people who have built something substantial together and are in the middle of managing it. They are not unkind. I want to say that clearly and mean it. Martin rings on Sundays. Usually. Karen checks in periodically. They have me for Christmas and for birthdays. They are, by any reasonable standard, present children. But present is a spectrum. And in the 6 years since Bill died, I have moved, gradually and without anyone quite deciding it, toward the quieter end of that spectrum. The dinners became less frequent. The casual visits, the ones that happened for no particular reason, the ones that happened simply because you were nearby and wanted to see someone, those became rare first. I did not ask for more. I did not know how to ask for more without it sounding like complaint. And so the spectrum moved, and I moved with it. I had Celia. Celia has been my friend since our 40s. Since we were both members of the same neighborhood committee that nobody remembered joining and which accomplished very little and produced 2 excellent friendships. Mine with Celia being one of them. She retired 2 years after I did, and we had our Fridays. A standing Friday morning walk followed by coffee and the kind of conversation that covers everything and nothing in approximately 2 hours. Celia kept me sane in the first year after Bill. She still keeps me sane, in her practical, slightly acerbic way. But Celia lives 25 minutes away and has her own grandchildren and her own Tuesdays and Thursdays. And friendships, however good, cannot replace everything. There are silences in a house that friendship cannot fill because friendship goes home at the end of the afternoon. The house was very quiet in the evenings. I had adapted to quiet. I had learned the art of it. Had to be in a quiet house without being hollowed by it. I had my books and my garden and my habit of listening to the radio at dinner, so the kitchen had voices in it even when it had no people. I had become, without noticing exactly when the transition happened, a woman who was managing rather than living, coping competently rather than being fully present in her own life. And then came the Tuesday when Rosie was 7 years old and Bill had been dead for 3 months, and she appeared at my front door. She had walked from school on her own, which she was not supposed to do. The school did not allow unaccompanied children to leave the premises without a specific arrangement. But Rosie had told her teacher that her grandmother was collecting her, which was not true, but which she had decided was close enough to the truth, given that she intended to get herself to her grandmother's house, and Rosie has always operated on a flexible relationship with literal accuracy when literal accuracy stands between her and something she has decided needs doing. I opened the door. She was standing on the porch with her school bag and the expression of someone who has arrived where she intended to arrive and is pleased about it. She said, "I came to check on you." I said, "Does your mom know you're here?" She said, "She will when I tell her." I said, "Come in." Then I called Karen from the kitchen while Rosie took off her school shoes with the particular thoroughness of a 7-year-old who has been told enough times to take off her shoes that it has become an instinct. Karen was briefly alarmed and then relieved, and then, on hearing that Rosie had navigated herself to my house without incident, resigned in the way that people are resigned about Rosie, with the understanding that she has decided something and the decision is final, and the remaining question is only how to make the decided thing safe. Rosie had a biscuit and a glass of milk, and she told me about her day. All of it, in full. with the particular conversational style of a 7-year-old that moves between topics at high speed without warning and circles back to things from 20 minutes earlier without explanation. She told me about a girl named Sophie who had said something unkind and then unsaid it. She told me about a drawing she had made that she considered her best work to date. She told me about something she had heard on the radio in a car that she did not understand and wanted explained. I explained it. We talked for an hour. Karen came to collect her and Rosie said goodbye and left her half-eaten biscuit on the plate with the completeness of someone who has finished all the important business and the biscuit was beside the point. I stood at the door and watched her go. And I thought, that was the best hour of the last 3 months. She came back the following Tuesday. Not because anyone arranged it. Because Rosie had decided. She arrived at 3:30, which is the time school ended and which, accounting for the walk, meant she left immediately. She said, "I'm coming on Tuesdays and Thursdays now." She said it the way she said most things, as a statement of existing fact rather than a proposal, as though the decision had already been made and this was simply the notification stage. I said, "What about your friends?" She said, "I can see them other days." I said, "Your mum knows?" She said. She said it was all right as long as I call when I arrive. She called when she arrived. She stood in my hallway with her school bag and her phone and she called Karen and said, "I'm here." Bye. And put the phone in her bag. And that was the beginning. 6 years. I know exactly what it has looked like from the outside. A grandmother, widowed, with a grandchild who visits twice a week. A pleasant arrangement. Convenient for the family to have someone keep an eye on the grandmother. Good for the granddaughter to have a relationship with an older relative. But I want to tell you what it has looked like from the inside. Because from the inside it has been something else entirely. Rosie arrives and the house changes. Not loudly. She's not a particularly loud child, though she has her moments. But the quality of the air changes. The particular air of a house that has one person in it shifts when a second person arrives. And when the second person is Rosie, the shift is distinct. The house becomes inhabited in a way it is not when I am alone in it. Inhabited in the full sense. Another consciousness in the rooms. Another pair of eyes seeing the same space and bringing it to life by seeing it. She makes herself at home without taking over. That is the specific quality of Rosie in this house. She has never, in 6 years, made me feel managed or visited or accommodated. She arrives and she is simply here, the way someone is simply here when they belong. She knows where the good biscuits are kept and where the spare key lives and which of my plants need watering when I forget. She knows that the third drawer in the kitchen sticks and must be pulled with both hands at a certain angle. She knows that I like the radio on while I cook and that I prefer the afternoon program to the morning one. She learned all of this by paying attention. By coming twice a week and watching and asking and remembering. By treating the knowledge of a person as something worth accumulating. What we do on Tuesdays and Thursdays has changed as she has grown. When she was 7, we drew together. She drew everything with great seriousness. And I drew badly but with enthusiasm. And we compared and she was diplomatically honest about the quality gap. When she was 8, we started reading the same books. Not together, separately, and then discussing them on Tuesday and Thursday, which is the practice of a book group and which we arrived at without naming it as such. When she was 9, she started asking me about before. About Bill, about the family, about what things were like when Martin and Bet were children. She asked with a historian's interest, making mental notes, filing things. When she was 10, she came the Tuesday after Bill had been dead for exactly 3 years. She did not know the date's significance. I had not told her. But she arrived and she looked at my face in the doorway and she said, "What is it today?" I said. "What do you mean?" she said. "Your face is different. Something has happened or something is the day of something." "Which is it?" I looked at this 10-year-old. At her precise, reading, noticing face. I said, "It is 3 years since your grandfather died," she said. Oh, she came in. She took off her shoes. She put the kettle on. She had been putting the kettle on since she was 9, when she decided she was old enough and that my tea was better when she made it, which was probably not true but which I allowed. She made the tea. She brought it to the sitting room. She sat beside me. She said, "Tell me something about him I don't know," and I told her. And she listened the way she always listened. Fully, without interruption, with her feet pulled under her on the sofa in the particular way she sat that drove Karen mildly mad and which I never minded. I told her about Bill teaching Martin to fish, and how Martin had been uninterested in the fish and deeply interested in the worms, which had frustrated Bill enormously. I told her about the time Bill had tried to fix the washing machine himself and flooded the kitchen, and how he had been simultaneously remorseful and amused for the entire clean-up. I told her about his habit of talking to the radio, answering it, arguing with it, as though the radio were a person who could be persuaded. She laughed at the worms. She laughed at the flooded kitchen. She was quiet when I talked about the radio. She said, "Do you do that?" "Talk to things," I said. "I talk to Bill sometimes," she said. "Does it help?" I said. "Yes, very much," she said. "Then you should keep doing it." 11, 12, 13 now. She is at that age. The age that takes children away from their grandparents as reliably as gravity. The age of friends and phones and the particular consuming business of becoming a person in the presence of other people your own age. Jamie, her brother, disappeared at 13. Not cruelly. He simply went toward his own life, which is exactly what 15-year-olds should do. He visits occasionally, warmly, and is otherwise occupied with being Jamie, which is a full-time enterprise. Rosie did not disappear at 13. She changed. She is changing. Every time I see her, she is slightly more than she was before. The way a plant grows between waterings, and you notice the difference when you look properly. She is taller. Her interests have deepened. The questions she asks are different from the ones she asked at 10. More complex, more considered, carrying more in them than 7-year-old questions carry. She talks about her friends now, about the social dynamics of the year group, about things that are funny and things that are confusing and things that are genuinely difficult. She asks my opinion. She does not always take it, but she asks. She still comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She still knocks 3 times. And I still do the same thing in my chest when I hear it. The quiet lift. The curtain moved by new air. The feeling of being found by someone who decided to keep finding me. I want to tell you what Rosie sees in this house that others do not see. Not because I want to criticize Martin and Karen, who are good people with full lives who love me and show it in the ways available to them, but because Rosie's seeing is the heart of this story and I want to honor it properly. She sees the small things, the everyday things that a person who visits twice a week accumulates knowledge of because they are consistently present in the small hours of an ordinary life. She notices when the biscuit tin is not as full as usual, which sometimes means I have not been to the shops, and sometimes means I have been eating more biscuits than usual, and she knows the difference because she knows me. She notices when the pile of books beside my chair has not changed since Thursday, which means I have not been reading, and not reading means something is not right because I always read. She noticed 3 months ago that I had been wearing the same cardigan for 3 visits running. Not because I could not change it. I am perfectly capable of managing my own wardrobe, but because I had been in a period of, as I have come to think of it, low energy. Not depressed. I do not think it was depression, though the line can be blurry, but a period of reduced engagement with the effort of daily life. The kind of flatness that visits widowed women of my age sometimes, when the season is grey and the evenings are long and the radio is company but not enough. She noticed. She said, on a Thursday, "You've been wearing that cardigan a lot," I said. "I like this cardigan," she said. "You do. But usually you rotate things," I said. "Do you keep track of my clothing?" she said. "I keep track of you." She said it simply, not as a statement of virtue. She was not announcing her attentiveness as something worth recognizing, just as a fact. The way she stated most things. I keep track of you. I sat with that. I looked at this 13-year-old who kept track of me, who knew my cardigan rotation, who noticed when the books had not moved. I said, "I have been a bit flat lately." "That is all," she said. "How long?" I said. "A few weeks," she said. "Does Mom know?" I said. "I haven't mentioned it," she said. "Why not?" I said. "She is busy. And it is not anything serious." Rosie looked at me with the specific expression she had developed. I had watched it develop over 6 years. The expression of a person who is deciding whether to accept an answer or to look further into it. She has always been a looker further. It is one of her most valuable and most occasionally exhausting qualities. She said, "It doesn't have to be serious for it to matter," I said. "No, I suppose it doesn't," she said. "Will you tell her?" "Where do you want me to?" I said. "I'll mention it," she said. "Tell me when you do." I did not mention it to Karen that week. I forgot. or rather I allowed myself to forget, which is not quite the same thing. And on the following Tuesday Rosie said, "Did you tell Mom?" And I said I had not yet. And she said, "I'll tell her then," and she did. She called Karen from my kitchen. I could hear her voice from the sitting room, matter of fact and clear. And she said, "Mom, Gran has been feeling flat for a few weeks. Can you check in more?" And then she came back and sat beside me, and we continued with our tea as though nothing had happened. Karen called that evening. She was warm and attentive in the phone call, and she came by on the Saturday unannounced, just to see how I was. She brought soup from the good place Martin liked. We had lunch together. It was a very pleasant afternoon. I thought about how that afternoon would not have happened without Rosie picking up the phone in my kitchen, without Rosie noticing the cardigan, without Rosie keeping track of me. I told Sally about it on our Friday walk. She listened, and then she said, "That child is extraordinary." I said, "Yes," she said. "Do Martin and Karen know what she does?" I said. "They know she visits," she said. "Do they know what the visit actually are? What they actually mean?" I thought about it. I said, "I don't think they know the full of it," Celia said. "Someone should tell them," I said. "Rosie would not want it made into something to be noticed," Celia said. "Then the someone isn't Rosie." The fall happened on a Wednesday morning in March, not a Tuesday or a Thursday, which matters because it meant Rosie was not due. The floor of the bathroom, which is not dangerous by any objective measure, became briefly dangerous at 9:30 when I misjudged the step from the bath mat and went down in the particular committed way of someone who has no time to be careful about it. It was not a serious fall. I want to say that clearly. Nothing was broken. Nothing was badly damaged. There was a bruise on my hip and my dignity, and nothing else of structural significance. But I was on the floor. And the floor was not where you want to be at 72 when you live alone and your phone is on the bedside table and the bedside table is 12 feet away. I lay there for a moment taking stock. Taking stock is what you do when you have fallen. You lie still and you assess, methodically, the parts of yourself, the way Bill used to assess the car after a minor bump. He would walk around it slowly with his hands in his pockets and say, "This is the damage. This is not the damage. This is what needs addressing." I did the same with my body. The hip, bruised. The wrist caught some of my weight, achy but functioning. The head, not hit. The rest, rattled but present. I could get up. I understood this from the assessment. I could get up. It was simply going to require effort and time and a particular sequence of rolling and pushing that my body was going to perform less gracefully than I would have preferred. I was going to get up. I was going to be fine. I simply needed a few minutes. I lay on the bathroom floor and I thought about Martin. I thought I could call Martin. I could reach the door frame from here, if I moved carefully, and the towel rail, and from the towel rail I could reach the doorway, and from the doorway the hallway, and from the hallway the bedroom, and from the bedroom the phone. Or I could call out for the neighbor, Mrs. Adami, who was often home in the mornings, and who had a key. These were the practical options. And I lay there and I thought, this is what it looks like now. This is the shape of the life. A fall on a Wednesday morning, and the calculation of who to call and how to reach them, and the phone 12 feet away. I thought about Bill, about having someone in the next room, about the specific luxury of not having to calculate. I was not afraid. I was not in pain beyond the manageable. I was simply, for a moment, lying on the bathroom floor, very aware of being alone in the fullest sense of the word. I began the process of getting up, slowly, in stages, the way the doctor had told me to do on the occasions I had been advised to do such things. I was halfway through this process when I heard the front door. Not a knock. A door. Opening. I said, "Hello," Rosie's voice gran. "Why is the door unlocked?" I said. "I'm in the bathroom." A pause. And her voice again, closer. At the bathroom door. "Are you all right?" I said. "I had a small fall. I am getting up. I am perfectly fine." A longer pause. "Then can I come in?" I said. Yes, she came in. She looked at me, half risen from the floor, one hand on the towel rail, the bathrobe slightly askew. And she took in this situation with the precise efficiency of someone who is not going to panic and is going to be useful. She said, "What do you need?" I said. The other hand. Just as steady. She gave me her hand. She is 13 and slight, and she could not have lifted me. But she did not need to lift me. She needed only to be steady. And she was steady. I got up. I sat on the edge of the bath. I breathed. She said, "Where does it hurt?" I said, "It." "And pride," she said. "Hip first. Then we can address the pride." She helped me to the bedroom. She brought me paracetamol from the cabinet, which she knew the location of because she knew the location of everything in this house. She made tea. She brought it to me where I was sitting on the edge of the bed. She sat beside me and she said nothing for a moment, which was exactly right. Then she said, "Anne." "Why was the door unlocked?" I said. "I sometimes leave it unlocked in the mornings," she said. "Why?" I said. "In case." She looked at me. She knew what I meant. In case something happened and someone needed to get in. In case of exactly this. She said, "Does anyone know you do that?" I said. "No," she said. "Does anyone know that you might? That there might be moments when you need someone to be able to get in?" I said. "I expected it soon," she said. Gran, she said it in the way she had developed recently. Not a child's exasperation, but a young woman's clear-eyed directness. You leave the door unlocked in case something happens, and you are counting on people to get in who do not know the door is unlocked. And you are the only person who knows this. I said, "Yes." When you put it like that, it sounds less sensible. She said, "It sounds like someone who needed to tell people things and didn't." I said, "Yes," she said. "You're going to let me tell Mom." It was not a question. I said, All right, she picked up her phone. She called Karen. I sat on my bed with my paracetamol and my tea and I listened to my 13-year-old granddaughter tell her mother, clearly and calmly and without drama, that I had had a fall and I was all right, but she thought it was time for some conversations to happen. It was a Wednesday. She had not been due. I said, when she finished the call, "Why did you come today? You don't come on Wednesdays." She looked at me. She said, "I had a feeling," I said. "A feeling," she said. "I kept thinking about you on the way to school. In a way, I don't usually think about you on Wednesdays. So I came at lunch. I looked at this child, this 13-year-old who had walked here at lunch on a Wednesday because she had a feeling, who had arrived to find the door unlocked, the door I leave unlocked in case, and who had come in. I said, 'Rosie,' she said. 'Yes,' I said. 'You found me,' she said. 'I always find you.' 'Run,' she said it simply, without performance, as though it was simply the most obvious thing to say. I thought about 6 years of Tuesdays and Thursdays, about 3 knocks, about the cardigan, about the books that had not moved, about the real question asked in 10 different ways by a girl who had decided, at 7 years old, to keep track of me and had never stopped. I said, 'I know you do.' Martin and Karen came that evening, both of them, which told me that Rosie's call had communicated something beyond the fall itself. They came in the early evening and they sat in the living room. Martin on the sofa, Karen beside him, Rosie on the footstool near the window with a book she was not reading. And the fall was discussed, and the unlocked door was discussed, and the arrangements for checking in were discussed with the practical efficiency of 2 people who are good at solving problems once the problems have been named. And then the practical efficiency ran out of new things to address, and we sat in a brief silence. And Martin said, "Mum, are you all right? Really? I mean." Beyond the hip, it was the right question. I was glad he asked it, and I answered it honestly. I told him about the flatness of the preceding weeks, the cardigan Rosie had noticed, the books that had not moved. I told him about the unlocked door in the mornings and what it represented. I told him, without accusation and without self-pity, that the weeks had been long and the evenings had been longer and that I had been managing but not thriving. He listened. He looked at the table while he listened, the way he looks when something is reaching him that he would prefer not to be reached by. Karen listened with her eyes on me, which is her way. She takes information through direct eye contact the way some people take it through immersion, through looking away and back. When I finished, it was quiet for a moment, and then Karen said, "Rosie told me something before you got here." She was speaking to Martin, not to me. She said, "She told me about the Tuesdays and Thursdays." Martin said, "What about them?" Karen said, "Not just that she visits. She told me what it is, what those visits actually are, what she and Gran actually do." She looked at Rosie. "Will you tell your dad?" Rosie looked up from her book. She considered. She said, We read the same books and talk about them. We do the garden sometimes. We drink tea. I tell Gran about school and she tells me about before. About Granddad and what things were like. She paused. I notice things. If something is different about Gran, I notice it. Like the cardigan thing. Like today, Martin said. The cardigan thing, Rosie said. She wore the same one for 3 visits, which meant something was off. Martin looked at his daughter. He said, "You've been doing this, monitoring her." For 6 years, Rosie said. Not monitoring. Visiting. And paying attention. Because that's what you do when you visit someone. Martin looked at the table again. He said. 6 years, Rosie said. Yes, he said. 2 days a week, she said. Most weeks. Sometimes 3. If I think she needs it. The room was quiet in a specific way. The way rooms go quiet when something that has been true for a long time is being named for the first time and the naming requires a moment of landing. Karen said. We didn't know the full of it, Rosie said. I know, Karen said. Why didn't you tell us? Rosie considered this. She said. Because Gran didn't want to seem like she needed checking on. And I didn't want to make it seem like I was reporting. I just wanted to come, Martin said. But she did need a, Rosie said. Yes. She needed someone to come. She said it without blame. Exactly as it was. And I came. I wanted to come. I have always wanted to come. She's my Gran. Martin looked at me. He had the expression. I know this expression. It is his father's expression. The one that happens when something has reached further into him than he was ready for. The expression of someone who has received something he is not sure how to hold. He said, Mom, I said. Martin, he said. I didn't, I said. I know, he said. I should have been, I said. You did what you did. Rosie did what she did. Both of those things are true. He said. That doesn't, I said. It doesn't make it fully right. But it makes it human. I looked at my son. You got busy. Life took you. You loved me and kept loving me and trusted that loving me was enough. It mostly was. But there were weeks, Martin, when the evenings were very long and I had not heard your voice in 10 days and the house was very quiet. He said. I didn't know, I said. I didn't tell you. That is my part of it. I did not ask for what I needed because I did not want to be the mother who demands. Who makes her needs a burden? Karen said. Quietly. You would never be that, I said. I know that now. I knew it somewhere. But the knowing somewhere is not the same as the saying out loud. We sat with that for a while. Rosie had put down her book completely now. She was listening with the full attention she gave to everything. Her feet tucked under her in the way that drove Karen mildly mad. Her eyes going between me and her parents with the quiet watchfulness of someone who has understood something for a long time and is watching the understanding arrive in others. Martin said, We're going to do better, I said. I know you will, he said. I mean it, Mom. Not just not just more coals. Actually bitter. Actually present. I said. I believe you. He looked at Rosie. He said, how did you know? When to come? How to notice things? Rosie said, I just paid attention. That's all. You notice things when you pay attention. He said, you've been paying more attention than I have, she said. You're busier than I am, he said. That's not an excuse. She looked at him with the clear and dramatic honesty that was entirely hers. She said, no, it's not. Things change after March. Martin calls on Wednesdays now, in addition to Sundays. Not always for long. Sometimes it is 5 minutes. Sometimes 20. Sometimes he has something specific to say, and sometimes he has nothing specific and says so, and we talk about nothing specific, and it is better than not calling. The nothing specific calls are, actually, the best ones. The ones that say, I am calling because I thought of you, not because there is news. Karen comes on the odd Saturday morning. Not every Saturday. Her life is genuinely full, and I do not want or expect every Saturday. But some. She brings croissants from the good bakery, and we eat them in the kitchen, and we talk about things that are not Martin or the grandchildren. Which means we have begun, finally, to talk about ourselves. I did not know, before these Saturday mornings, that Karen had been a keen swimmer in her 20s and that she missed it. I did not know about the books she had been meaning to write for 15 years. I did not know many things about her because we had not had the kind of time that produces the knowledge. We are having it now. That came from New Zealand in April. She had been planning to come anyway. She comes every 18 months or so. But after March she brought the visit forward, and she stayed for 3 weeks, which she had not done since the year Bill died. We had time. Real time. The unhurried kind. We had days that did not have to be fitted into a schedule. We had evenings that began without agenda and went where they went. She went home. I stood at the airport and I watched her go, the way I'd always watch her go, with the familiar ache of the too-far daughter. But different this time. Different because the 3 weeks had filled something. Because we had used the time properly. Because she knew things about me now that she had not known before. Rosie still comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She still knocks 3 times. She still knows where the good biscuits are and how the third drawer sticks and which plants need watering when I forget. She is 13 and she is changing in the way that 13-year-olds change. Quickly, daily, in directions that are both entirely predictable and entirely surprising. She talks about things that 14 will bring. She talks about what she wants to study, about what she thinks about things in the world, about ideas she is forming and positions she is taking, and the specific energy of someone whose thinking is becoming their own. She still asks about before, about Bill, about the family. She has been writing things down, I have noticed. She has a small notebook that she brings sometimes and in which she records things, dates and names and the particular stories she wants to keep. She is archiving us. Archiving me. Keeping the record of a person who nearly went unrecorded, I found her one Thursday afternoon, reading back through her notebook at the kitchen table. She was reading something and she stopped and she looked up and she said, did you know that Granddad's father was a baker? I said. Yes, she said. You told me that last March. And I wrote it down. And I nearly forgot, and then I found it again. I said. Good that you wrote it down, she said. I write everything down now, in case I need it later. I said. In case you need it for what? She said. I don't know yet. But some things are too important not to keep. I looked at my granddaughter with her notebook and her archive of us. I thought about what it means to be kept. Not in the sentimental sense. Not as a photograph on a wall or a name on a gravestone. But kept in the active sense. In the sense of someone deciding that the things you are in have been worth the effort of writing down. She had been keeping me for 6 years. Long before the notebook. She had been keeping me with the visits and the noticing and the 3 knocks and the Tuesday and Thursday presence in a house that was otherwise quiet. I said, Rosie, she looked up. I said, do you know what you have given me? She said, tea and biscuits. Mostly. I said, more than that. She waited. I said, you found me. When I was becoming hard to find. When the week was very long and the evenings were very quiet and I was beginning to feel like the sort of person who was background rather than present. You came. Twice a week. For 6 years. Without being asked. You knocked 3 times and you came in and you sat with me and you paid attention and you kept track of me and you kept me. She was very still. I said, I do not think you will fully understand. At 13. What that meant. But I want to say it now so that you know. And so that you have it when you are older and need to know what you did. She said, I came because I wanted to come, they said. I know, she said. It wasn't. I wasn't doing it for you. I said. I know that too, she said. I came because you're you. Because you're the best person I know. Because every time I knock you're there and you're glad I've come and we talk about real things and you take me seriously even when I'm saying things that probably aren't very serious yet. She looked at her hands. I came because I needed to come. Because being here is the place I'm most. The place where I'm most myself. I sat with that. With what she had just given me. The other side of the exchange. The one I had not seen clearly until now. That the finding had gone both ways. That she had been finding me and I had been finding her. That for 6 years we had been doing for each other what neither of us could quite do alone. I said, then we found each other. She looked up. She said, yes, she said it with the simplicity of something that is completely true. I said, good, it is summer now. The garden is its best self in summer. Bill's garden, which I have tended for 6 years and which has become, over time, mine too. Mine in the new sense. Mine because I have learned it without him and because the learning has left its marks on both the garden and me. Rosie comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays still. She will come on Tuesdays and Thursdays until she goes to university, which is 3 years away and which I have decided not to think about yet. She will go and she will be extraordinary at whatever she does, and she will come back for the holidays, and she will come back changed and growing, and I will be here when she comes back, and we will drink tea and she will tell me about it. I am well. I have said that before in this story, and I want to say it again here, at the end, because it is truer now than it was. Not just managing. Well, the flatness of the cardigan-wearing weeks has not visited in some time. The evenings are quieter than they were when Bill was here, and they will always be quieter than that. But they are not empty in the way they were for a while. Martin calls on Wednesdays. Karen brings croissants. Bet and I have a date for November. Celia still does Fridays. And twice a week the world's best sound comes through the front door. 3 knocks. I want to say something about Rosie. About what she taught me. Not the lesson she knew she was teaching. She was not teaching me anything deliberately. She was simply doing what she did. But what I learned from watching her do it is something I want to give you. She looked for me when looking was not required of her. Nobody assigned her the task. Nobody told her I needed looking for. Nobody said, go to your grandmother twice a week and pay attention and keep track. She decided it herself, at 7 years old, because she had looked at me and seen someone worth going to. And I want to say, if there is a Rosie in your life, a person who looks for you when looking is not required, who knocks when they do not have to knock, who notices the cardigan and the books that have not moved in the small unlocked door of your daily life, that person is showing you something. They're showing you that you are worth looking for, worth the walk after school, worth the attention, worth the keeping. Receive it. Receive it fully. Do not deflect it with "oh, you don't need to," and don't trouble yourself, and I'm perfectly fine. It is not trouble. It is love in the form of showing up. And love in the form of showing up is the most real form love has. And if you are the one who has not been looking, the Martin, the Karen, the person who loves someone and trusts that loving from a distance is enough, I want to say, go and knock. Today. Not because you feel guilty. Not because someone has pointed out your absence. But because the person who waits for your knock has learned, in your absence, to manage. And managing is not the same as being found. And being found is what people need most, at every age. You do not need an occasion. You do not need news or a reason or a thing to say. 3 knocks is enough. The arrival is enough. Turn up on a Wednesday and say it's me. I came because I thought of you. And watch what happens to the person inside. Watch the curtain lift. Rosie is coming this afternoon. It is a Thursday, and she will arrive at 3:30, and she will knock 3 times and call through the door, "Gran, it's me," as though I could not know. And I will open the door, and she will be there with her school bag and her notebook and whatever she has been thinking about since Tuesday that she needs to talk through. She will put the kettle on. She has always put the kettle on. We will drink our tea. We will talk about her week and my week, and about the book we have both been reading, and whether the ending was right, and about what Bill would have thought of something she read about the garden, which she asks about more often lately, which I think means she is beginning to love the garden the way I love it. I hope so. I would like someone to love the garden when I cannot tend it anymore. And in the middle of it, at some point, she will look at me with those noticing eyes and she will say, with the precision of someone who wants the real answer, "How are you, Ron? Really?" And I will tell her, honestly, the way I have always told her, the way she taught me to tell her by asking the right question every time. I will say, "I am well. I am better than I deserve to be. I am sitting in my house, in my garden, in my life that is mine and full and occupied and properly inhabited. And you are here. And that is everything. Rosie. That is completely enough." 3 knocks. The world's best sound.